Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our England Football Learning webinar. So this evening, we're going to be looking at and delving into a topic that we think is just so important for every coach working with every age group at every level of the game. And that topic is how we manage our players' emotions and behaviours. Just going to give you an overview of the session aims. So I'll let you have a little browse at them. And essentially, as we've already said, in terms of the topic, one that's relevant for every coach working at every age group at every level of the game, managing the emotions and the behaviours of our players. So we're going to give you some theoretical underpinning and then some thoughts and ideas that you can take away and apply within your context. Let's get going first of all about ourselves. So the concept of self is actually one of our key pillars within our coach development framework. And that concept of self is actually really, really important when we consider that our behaviours will impact on our players. So you can see on the screen there a very simple model. It's called the cognitive triangle. And I'm going to keep this really brief and really simple. Let's start at the top. Our thoughts impact on our feelings and on our emotions, which impact on our behaviours, which actually then have a knock-on effect in terms of our performance as a coach. So a few little bits of information there for you. First of all, the neuroscience. It actually tells us that typically we would have anything up to 60,000 thoughts every day. Wow, 60,000 thoughts every day. Unbelievably, 80% of them are negative. Now, this is the bit where I'm not going to delve into a history lesson, okay? But in terms of our evolution as human beings, that's simply how we are wired. So when we consider our time as primitive man, there was the whole thing around, it still exists, the fight or flight response. And the survival of the fittest in terms of us as human beings was those individuals who actually saw danger or threat or potential harm. So they saw the negative and they responded and basically got out of there. So it might have been some sort of big beast in the jungle. Yeah. And that's actually shaped how our brains work. So 80% of our thoughts are negative and 95% are repetitive. Therefore, the last point on the screen at the minute, as coaches, we really need to be intentional about having positive thoughts. Otherwise, our brains will take us naturally to thinking negatively about situations.
It's amazing the impact that you can have on another person. Like, it's so powerful and it can make such a difference on somebody. So I just think as coaches, we're role models, but we can make such a difference. And I think sometimes we underestimate that. We almost just take it for granted, I think, sometimes.
When you are noticing stuff, and let's talk at the minute about behaviours, let's laser focus on our topic tonight. Yeah. When you're seeing an emotional response, certain behaviour, when one of your players does that once, it's an incident. If they do it twice, it could be purely a coincidence. But if you see it a third time, and that might be a third time over a couple of sessions, by the way, then that's a pattern. And our message is, in terms of that art of noticing, because coaching is hard. Yeah. In terms of that art of noticing, act when you see a pattern of behaviours. And by act, that might be an intervention around behaviour. That might be something that you really need to manage carefully because the behaviour hasn't been good at all. That might actually be you acting in terms of coaching. So hopefully that message on the screen there is coming through loud and clear, that if we jump on things as a one-off, it might have just been a one-off. So try to think of that, about that once, twice, 3 times, and that's your pattern, and then work from there.
if I'm delivering a session, the players might have certain things they've experienced that's external, that's away from the session. So it might be friendship, it might be school, it might be context in family life. But at the same time, it might be the weather, facilities, and environment. Internally, as a coach, I might be able to influence more on the session organization, the learning outcomes, the things, the equipment that we're using. But at the same time, how I deliver the session alongside maybe a co-coach or a volunteer and so forth. So in that way, when we look at the external and the internal, how much information and how much preparation we have might support us in order to help with player behaviors. One of the messages on that last question that Caroline put in was she looks at the Facebook page of the school and sees what's maybe the focus of the week or things that players have received stars on. So in that way, she's gathering real good intel on the external things that are happening within that player's life and utilizing that in that way. And for me, from experience, is great to have communication with the parent where possible to find out where individual players might be, those that are coming back from injuries or maybe a period of exams, or certain things going within their friendship lives. So getting that context has helped me to catch those players in and incorporate them within the session in a more positive way. So in that way, breaking that down, be clear on the things you can control and the things or those things that you can't. And the ones that you can, how can you go out and get more info in regards to that and utilizing it for your session or your match day?
Yeah, I'm probably going to go on a slightly different angle around that points of the season. So I think as coaches, we quite like routine and we like structure when we know, like our players, on this day, this is when we train, this is where we train. And sometimes I just think it just needs a slight change and it can almost disrupt everything. So lots of people at the moment are probably shifting from summer training to winter training, where you go from training on your grass pitch to training on your local AstroTurf, for example. That often means a change of timing, a change of pitch space, a change of pitch size. And the first few weeks there, I have no doubt there will be a difference in your players because it's like it's new again. It's our same session, it's our same group of players, but it's a different environment. And it's a little bit of like uncertainty. There's a comment in the chat box just now around Christmas time, how the players get excited. Yeah, of course, because they're children and it's Christmas and there's like loads of other stuff going on. Our football sessions are quite a social time for our players. So it's that opportunity for them to come and chat and share. And we just need to be mindful that there's going to, at different stages of the year, there's going to be different things going on that will influence how they come to football and then actually what our sessions might look and feel like.
When I look back at one of the grassroots clubs I worked at in the past, we used to use the tactics board and a pen and just draw emojis. And it gave the kids a sense of exploration in terms of expressing their feelings, but in a very personal way. And doing that at the beginning of the session and doing that at the end of the session and seeing where they are. And sometimes you can see where trigger points have happened. Someone's come into the session really happy and something has happened in the middle in the session where either they wasn't able to perform or execute something that was within the practice, and that really affected them and how they left the session. And for me as a coach, it's so important how they leave feeling the session, because that carries on. And I might not see them for 2 days, 1 week, even some grassroots clubs. So in that way, these are just some strategies that we can use in terms of the flashcards. And also just with the cards, when we do throw out direct questions to players in their front of the whole group, it's hard for them to sometimes express and say what's on their mind. But when they can do it maybe in a small group or by themselves, it gives them a little bit more autonomousness to be able to truly go, do you know what, that one. They might even whisper it because they don't want the group to actually hear that they didn't understand something or they're not happy about it. So it does really personalize it depending on how you use it. So in terms of further, how do we gather information with the players, for the players. This is a player passport document, which Dan will share with you later. And it's just a way of asking simple questions that will help on how you go about engaging with the players. So something simple as like what the player likes to be called might be a real good connector that makes them feel good. So they might not want their full name, or they might have a nickname or they might have a role model that they like to follow. So in that way, you're connecting it. Favorite things about maybe some ball skills, or even a team or a player, that's another kind of connection. How we go about supporting them, what makes them happy. There's some questions around how they might want you to respond and share information. So they might ask, coach, when you speak slowly, or when you use the tactics board, or when you get me one-to-one away from the group, when you explain it in that way, it really helps to digest that information. So although this is a template, you can take this, which will be shared, and build your own template that could be more individualized or more personalized with your group, that will help to gather more information. Anything on that, Vinny and Vicky, that you'd like to share?
Again, I just think, we've said it before, it's another tool that you can use to help you probably just get to know your players that little bit more. But that safety piece probably isn't just physical safety. So it's not just, are the goals out of the way and is the equipment out of the way? It's that like psychological safety. Is this an environment? Is this a football session where they can go and try and be creative, to try new things without fear of failure, without fear of being shouted at or criticised? Or is it a place where they can come and feel good about their self? So actually, where we've spoken about that phrase already, Taff, I absolutely love that you just tried to take that player on. Actually, Taff, you might have lost the ball, but that's all right. Like you went and tried it. So it's being mindful of, like, how do we create that environment? What does it look like? And how does it feel for our players within that? And if we can get that right, the respect comes in that actually, like, yes, our players will learn and develop and listen to us, but also like we need to take our time to listen to them, listen to their feedback, listen to their observations, because respect goes both ways. And then we can create that environment, like we say, where those players can learn, whatever that might be. And that might be football related, but that actually might be wider than football in terms of societal skills and learning to get along with each other and how we communicate with each other. But for me, all three of those are so important that they link together. Taff, I saw you nodding. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think they interconnect, and when we start to really enhance certain areas, it has this ripple effect, and then it affects the next part. So just from a learning perspective, like if we have players, for example, set some learning objectives or a skill that they want to practice in the game, and we are just the observant on seeing them doing it. So in that way, they feel ownership, and we praise and guide within that. That really helps them to feel, okay, like this is my task. It's not about whether win the game or lose or draw, whatever happens. I've got this solely for me. And if I can walk away at the end of the game, yes, the result is whatever the outcomes, whatever, but I have a positive element for myself that I can walk away with. And that might be done in peers, which might help with some peer-to-peer safe space. And ultimately that creates that respect between them two as well. So in that way, having some clarity on what the individuals want to do, and us being the facilitators and supporters of it, will create that safe and respectful environment as well.
And part of that is, and we've spoken about it already, and I've been reading your comments in the chat box, we've got a really, really crucial role to play in the method and how we give feedback to our players. So by feedback, that doesn't really need to be in depth. Like I say, that could be as simple as recognizing a player having a go at something within your session. But there's probably a little bit of a checklist, or we've said it already, a bit of a tool that can support us with that. So we want to make sure that feedback is frequent. Like, we don't want a player to have to go weeks and weeks before you notice that they've done something again. So it's that, are we noticing our players, and are we making sure that we give them that feedback when we see it?
But I think there's detail within the detail as well. So when we are giving praise, actually saying the person's name right from the onset draws the attention of the group. I am talking about you. So Vinny, the way you started off today, I'm not talking about anyone else. I'm directing at you. So there is detail that creates more emphasis and praise, and all of those aspects that you talked about, Vicky. It's you have to really be conscious about it, rather than, okay, one week I do this, next week I do that. So how you go about being frequent and consistent and positive and repetitive. It might be just certain noticing words that you have for a certain player, or it might be a relationship that you have, like naming a certain professional player. They replicate certain behaviors, like, I saw you do that, like so-and-so. And that might be the noticing line that they need. And that's really personalized. So in that way, being thoughtful, how am I actually giving that feedback to help the player?
Yeah, and look, you can pretty much guarantee it. As soon as your players come into the session, one of the first things, certainly for me, and you might have some different ones, but one of the first things they often say is, are we playing a match tonight? When are we playing a match tonight? Or very similar to those couple. If you've got anything different, obviously pop it in the chat box. But and fantastic, of course they want to ask that, because they're at football because they want to play football. And that gives us so much freedom as coaches to make sure that we make that happen. That could be, like Vinny just said, it could be from the very start when they come in. It could be that our game is the last section of the session. But it's why our players come to training to play football. That's great for us because we know that's what they want. So then it's around, well, actually, like, how do we make that happen, and how do we maximize that for our players? Digital video games and how that links into our sessions. We know that our young people spend a lot of time playing games on various platforms, and it's become ingrained in their habits, their motivations, their language that they use. We can use that as a real tool for us as coaches when we're planning our sessions. And there's some, I guess, probably some buzzwords we could say on the screens that we can use to bring into real life. So just as an example, and Vin, Taff, I'll pass over to you in a minute, but just the use of levels. You could run a training session where each activity that you progress becomes a new level. So when the players come in, and you can say to them, right, our challenge today, team, is we want to get to level 5 by the end of the session. And we've almost got that buy-in from the start. You know, do you think we can do it? Do you think we can get there? Level 5 is our aim. This is level 1. This is our first activity. And we can go and take part. And then actually, right, Vinny, you did a fantastic job then. I really, really loved that you were dribbling and you took on those players. I think we're ready to move on to level 2. So we're working towards a set goal, a set aim, but the players are on that journey as well. And there could be a framework, it can be visual, it could be written up on whiteboards. But that language, that process, and that progress, it also gives us feedback that we can give within that, which is things that we've been discussing this evening.
As always, so what? What does it mean to you? But certainly from your engagement, we've got a sense that it means a lot. And the key things for us is, can you consider at least 2 things that you're going to take away from tonight's workshop? And what are you going to do differently? And please remember, when you do try things and it's a little bit different, a little bit left field, maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone, if you come away thinking that was a fail, then see the word fail as a first attempt in learning, or a further attempt in learning. Okay? And that's your growth mindset, your positivity, you thinking to the positive rather than to the negative, which is where we teed off right at the start. So guys, we just want to say a huge thank you to you for, first of all, giving of your time this evening. I'm sure many of you are volunteer coaches, So to be in here tonight, and hopefully you've picked up stuff. And as I say in my former profession as a teacher, every day's a school day.